I'm going to call the meeting of the Comment Service Committee to order, and we'll determine whether we have a quorum. Pam, are you the one who's going to call the roll on that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, would you go ahead?
Sure. Mr. Brennan? Ms. Horacio? Ms. Horacio? I thought I saw her come in.
I thought I saw her.
Mr. Fergus?
Probably muted.
Present.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Gleaton? Ms. Mood?
Here.
Mr. Jenkins? Ms. Robinson?
Here.
Mr. Coon? Okay, there are 21.
Here.
That was Mr. Jenkins.
Coon?
Bobby
Okay,
Coon. This is Bobby Coon.
Thank you. I'm going to call Ms. Horacio. I thought I saw you earlier. Are you on the call?
Yes, I had to pop off and now I'm back.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to try Ms. Gleaton again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, she's not on the call yet. Mr. Brennan? Madam Chair, you do have a quorum.
Oh, all right.
I'm here.
I'm sorry, who said they were here?
Will Brennan.
Oh,
Thank you,
good,
Mr.
Mr.
Brennan.
Brennan. Glad you got that on. Okay, so the only one that of the voting members that we're missing is Ms. Gleaton, and then we're missing Mr. Coon and the advisory. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay,
correct.
well, we'll go ahead and proceed and hope that maybe they will join us later. And I want to just take a minute to welcome Will Brennan to the Service Committee. I got your message that you would be calling in, and I'm so glad to have you participating with us. So we welcome you, and we'll be happy to hear what you have to say in the meeting.
Great, thank you so much for sending that info.
Okay. The next is the adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
So it's moved by Mr. Ratio. Second. I'll second. I think we can do a voice vote on this. All in favor, say aye.
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 And any opposed? Hearing none opposed, the agenda is approved. Item number 3 is to hear from the Midlands Transit Riders Association. Mr. Gossett, are you on the call? Is there anyone else from the Midlands Transit Riders Association on the call today to speak to us? All right.
Madam Chair, I don't see anyone.
Okay, well, we'll move on then to the next item. The next 3 items are adoption of minutes from earlier meetings. So I'm going to take these one by one simply because in case somebody has questions or some changes to make. So we'll start with number 4, the minutes from December 9th. Do I have a motion to adopt those minutes?
So
Move
moved.
to approve. Oh, I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no opposition, we'll approve the minutes for December 9th. I will remind you that on the Zoom calls, if you're not speaking, if you will put yourself on mute, that will help us with the background noise. Okay, so now we're moving to item 5, adoption of the minutes from the January 13th, 2021 meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved. As a second?
Second.
A second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Hearing no opposition, the minutes for January 13 are approved. And item number 6, adoption of the minutes from February 10th, 2021. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
So move a second
Second.
and a second. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the minutes for February 10th are approved. Thanks. All right, item number 7 are matters referred from the Board of Directors. And Mr. Ando will just report to us on what those items, pending items are right now, because we have some of them to discuss later on the agenda. So, John?
Yes, Madam Chairwoman, and members of the committee. From the board, you have discussed key personnel appointments. That's on the agenda today. You have reviewed soda cap connector suspension. That's on the agenda today. And then page 27, develop a long-term service plan primarily in Richland County. That will be discussed at the board on March 24th. And materials have been provided to all committee members and all board members in relation to this project. The next one relates to direct staff to develop a park and ride service and an alternative plan for service along the I-26 corridor. That will be included in the long-term service plan once direction from the board has been provided to the consultant. The last one, develop streetscape plan for Hardin and Taylor plus Superstop. The shelters have been delivered and they're in the process of being installed. Once the shelter is installed at Hardin and Taylor, then this line item will be closed, which was anticipated for later on this month. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Any of you have questions for John on those items?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yes,
We
Mr. Ferguson.
need a motion on that soda cap connector.
We're taking that up as an agenda item on today, so we'll be discussing
okay.
that.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? All right, then we'll just accept John's report as information and move on to ridership. Is Eric gonna lead this? You've gotten in your packet several months of ridership data, so I'm hoping that Eric will sort of give us some what he sees as the trends in the ridership, any highlights he wants to call to our attention, and then we'll have any questions that you have. Mr. Harris?
Yes, thank you to the members of the committee. Can you guys hear me well?
Yes, thanks.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess first starting off with routes with positive response to COVID-19. One second. Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes, that is better, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so first starting off with routes with a positive response to COVID-19. We're looking at Route 42, which is Millwood Avenue. I think this is as a result of new development, more available apartment units. Also, it's the path of least resistance when you're looking at Millwood Avenue. There was some construction at the earlier parts of last year with the bike lane installation. Also, Route 75, Decker and Park Lane. This is connected to essential locations. Walmart, Columbia Place Mall, Palmetto GBA, which is the subsidiary of Blue Cross Blue Shield. Also is located outside of Fort Jackson in Route 76, which is the Fort Jackson route. It's not in operation for much of the year as well. So also looking at Route 32, North Main and Hardscrabble, is also connected to Palmetto GBA, and it had a significant, I'm just looking at the area, probably was a significant loss in jobs. In that area is also a lot of food securities and insecurities and things of that nature. Looking at Route 83L, which is St. Andrews, Again, we're running the fare free service, and also this is definitely a hot commodity in this area. We're looking at Harbison Walmart, Superstop, Sam's Club, Columbiana Mall, Palmetto Health, restaurants, whole nine in that area. Also, you're looking at a lot of income restricted neighborhoods along that corridor. Now, other notes, I guess you can look at a major route, 801. Well, all the major routes remain consistent, meaning 101 and the 3-digit routes. But looking at 801, again, that's the Harbison area. It had a significant change to date, from July to date. The percent change there is around 21%. Is in line with 83L. So again, it's to be expected.
So let me interrupt you just a minute, just to be sure that what you're outlining for us are routes that are not currently meeting the ridership standards, and some of the reasons for that.
No, these routes are literally trending in the right direction. They're doing pretty well. Yep. Good. Okay, that's good to clarify that. Good. Absolutely. So the information, mostly what I just provided to you, was from January to January. So looking specifically at July, Route 97, Batesburg, Leesville, I have to just throw it out there for the sake, but in July I had 1 passenger, and by the time we got to December, we were looking at around 16 passengers. So you've seen a pretty big increase there. Also our Nephron route, which is Route 92X, we had upwards of 335 passengers from what we would consider normal ridership. And from July to October, we had a percent change of pretty much 56%. And October to date, we're down 25%, but we're still trending in a pretty good direction there. Looking at dark ridership, we're slowly moving in the right direction, and this is from July. We're about 35% away from what we would consider normal ridership as well. And for other routes, I guess if we were to list them out to make it simple for a lot of us who are not necessarily looking at the paperwork that I'm looking at, as it relates to statistical significance, we're looking at the top 5 and the bottom 5. The top 5 performing routes, we're looking at 83L, St. Andrews route, Route 77, which is the Polo route, Forest Drive Walmart, Route 75, Decker and Park Lane, Route 45, Leesburg, Hazelwood, which is interline with 401, the Gardens Fair, Walmart, that area. I guess an honorable mention would definitely be DART services, definitely doing well. Now on the bottom 5, we'll be looking at 57L, which is Killian and Clemson, Route 47, Eastover and Gadsden, Route 55, Sand Hills, Route 1, West Columbia, Casey. We're down about 50% in ridership. 61 Shop Road, which is our Allen S. Glenn Detention Center route. But outside of that, that is the report that I have you guys this morning.
Okay. Do you have any questions or comments for Eric? I can tell you, in looking over those months of data, it seemed to me that what we were seeing was a gradual building back, not up to the level that we had in 2019 before the pandemic, but a kind of steady, gradual growth with maybe one dip in October, that we saw a tremendous growth in the van pool participation. That stood out for me. And let me see if I made myself any other notes. Now, tell me exactly, where does the university service show up on our ridership reports, Eric? I was having trouble finding that.
Yes, no, absolutely. So the university service, Route 20 is the most popular route as it stands. And all other routes are pretty consistent across the board. You've seen a pretty huge dip in December, but that's because much of that month there was a modified service. And outside of that, everything is trending back into, I guess you can call it normal service. Now
moving in. Good.
And, Madam Chairman,
yes,
that information is shown under connector shuttle category, and it's routes 13 to 25.
Okay, I've looked, but I just couldn't be sure about that. Great, that helps.
And as Eric mentioned, yeah, the one that's performing the best is Route 20. All the other ones are underperforming. And it's expected because of the fact that the campus has been primarily on a hybrid schedule, which is half online courses, half in-person courses.
Okay. Well, another thing that I noticed was that that surprised me was that in some months our weekend ridership went above the 2019. I don't know exactly how to account for that, except maybe the fare free services. What do you think about that, Eric?
No, absolutely. I 100% agree with you. That is the change. Sometimes, I guess on the weekends, you see a drop because of employment. Most people are traveling in, I guess you can say, in the urbanized area and back and forth. But in this case, you're starting to see fare-free service. It kind of incentivizes a lot of riders to want to utilize our services on during that time as well.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. Any other questions for Eric?
Yeah, Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Burgess.
this ran across my mind with the service being about 15 bus drivers short and USC going back full campus in the fall. What efforts are we making to alleviate that crisis?
All right. Here's what I'm going to do with that question, if I may. Can I hold that for the RAPDEV report? Because they would, Mr. Bell
Sure.
and his staff would be able to report to us on their staffing level.
Sure.
Can we do that? I'll make a note. Thank you. Anything else? Okay.
Madam Chair?
Madam Chairman.
Yes.
Madam Chair, this is Pam.
Pam, yeah.
Gosh.
I can't, oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to just note for the record that Mrs. Gleaton has joined.
Oh, good.
Madam,
All right.
Madam
And then
Madam
we
Chair.
had someone else asking to be recognized.
Yes, this is Mike Green.
Okay, Mike.
Could you forward me those ridership statistics?
Sure. Pam, can we just send the packet to Mr. Green?
Sure.
Okay, the attachments for the service committee meeting. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, well, now we're on item 9A, the passenger amenities program. Mr. Warren, you with us from Davis and Floyd?
This is Zane
Yeah.
McGee with Davis and Floyd.
Oh, Zane, thanks. Go ahead.
Okay, so in the past month, we have received 8 encroachment permits from the DOT, and also the shelters that were ordered have been delivered, and AOS is working to install those right now. On page 53 of the report, any of the shelters in the work in progress section that are listed as shelter available, those are the ones that have received a shelter, and it should be installed within the next month. And in addition, since we sent this report, stop number 784 has been approved. We also have currently 14 shelters in design, 7 benches in design, and yesterday we received an additional list from the comment that we will begin to work on as well. That's all I
Okay.
have. If there are any questions?
Okay, your report has a substantial amount of work reflected in that. Do members of the committee or others have any questions for Ms. McGee? All right, if not, we'll accept your report as information. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mood,
Yes.
I'm not sure that this is a question for Davis and Floyd, but just regarding the amenities, are we having good responses from the neighbors and the surrounding businesses when we go to install amenities? I know that I got a call from a neighbor down the street from me who got word that there would be an amenity near his home and was very much against it. Are we getting do we know if we're getting good responses from others welcoming the amenities?
Thanks for that question, Allison. I don't know who wants to field it. John, Zach?
I can take that question.
Okay.
So for the most part, we are receiving positive responses. Normally what will happen, someone will reach out to us and we will respond to that request for an amenity, whether that's a bench or a shelter. Equally, we are looking at performance metrics to figure out best locations as it relates to safety and all other matters to place a bench or a shelter at those locations as well. And as of right now, anytime we've received any response to that magnitude, or if we receive recommendation from the City of Columbia, City of KC, wherever it may be, that they're recommended that we reach out to the neighborhood associations, we've done that as well. And that's pretty much our work process right now.
All right, so am I hearing that the kind of call that Allison got is really the exception rather than the rule?
No, absolutely. And again, anytime we receive those phone calls, we try to make sure that we work with them and also the neighborhood associations to see what we can do to either amend the work that we plan, the work plans for that location, or we take a look at moving work to another location.
Okay, well, that's good to know that we do that follow up, because that's really important. Allison, does that answer your question?
Yes. So it sounds like we are really taking a community-led approach to amenities. So that sounds great.
Good.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Fergus.
Around town, they seem to do a very good job with these benches and shelters. The only, if you live in the Northeast, I noticed they put bus stop and shelters on the opposite side of the street that's in the middle of the block, rather than at a corner. So maybe they have some justification for that, but that means the rider has to cross six to 8 lanes of traffic to get across the street rather than at a corner and walk into it. And that's up 2 Notch Road. But in the inner city, the location and looks seem to be very good.
Okay, so does anybody want to comment on what sometimes occurs in terms of a stop being located in the middle of a block rather than at an intersection? Can someone speak to that?
Absolutely. It'd be great if you can provide more information on where it's located. But what would happen, as of late, what we would do, we would coordinate with DOT and to see where on their roadway are they planning to install a crosswalk. And from there, we're trying to prioritize again bus shelters, benches, anything along that side, whether it's a semi-seat as well, to address pedestrian needs. So we're trying to coordinate with them. So if there's a location that you have in question, I'd be happy to take a look at that.
All right, so Mr. Fergus, will you just follow up with Eric, or Eric, will you follow up with Mr. Fergus after the meeting for specific location?
Yes, because all of them are up 2 Notch Road, go heading to Sand Hill, on the left side going to Sand Hill. And it's about 3 or 4 in the middle of the block. So I'm thinking they were caught with that 1,000 feet that they have in between stops. But if they're at the corner, the safety factor, they won't have to cross other than at a light.
I get the question. So, so Eric, is that enough for you to just take a look at at the area that he's talking about?
Absolutely. I definitely appreciate those comments. I'll take a look at that and see what we can do, or see if we have to make any changes there.
All right. All right. Thanks so much. Well, if there are no other questions or comments on the passenger amenities, thank you, Mr. McGee. And we'll move on to item 9B, service delivery update since February 8th. And the reason for that date, of course, is that February 8th is when we had the rollout of changes in the service, and we know we hit some rough spots on that. So this is just a chance for for Mr. Bell to from RapDev to update us on where we stand now, what sort of things they've been able to work through. Just give us an update now on the service since February 8th. And then we'll hear from the comment staff after if they have anything to add. So Mr. Bell.
Yes,
Madam Chair, before you get started.
Yes.
I'm not familiar with Mr. Bell.
Oh, I'm sorry. Maurice Bell is the general manager for RapDev. Let's see if I can find him on our screen. Anyway, that's Mr.
Oh, okay.
This is Mr. Maurice Bell, who's the general manager for RapDev.
Is this his first meeting?
No.
He's been on the line with us before. Yeah.
Oh, okay. My fault.
This is not the new operations person. This is the general manager.
General
Mr.
manager. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay.
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair. I appreciate it, Ms. Mood, that get the opportunity to share this with you. Yeah, we all know that the challenges on February 8th have been ongoing, and we have been working very hard to try and find other ways to be able to supplement the service, and have been trying to, of course, figure out how to take operators and make sure that we're maximizing the utilization of all of our operators to make sure service is being delivered. But unfortunately, due to the shortage in operators, that it continues to be a challenge. But I'm glad, and we'll be reporting here a little bit later, some of our efforts towards that. Right now, we do see the afternoon as being the most difficult time for us to be providing service outside of normal challenges, day-to-day challenges. Right now, we consistently receive about 5 operator call-offs on average, and that's contributing to some of the additional challenges that we have with this new service change. But the efforts to try and take a look at the routes, piece them apart, working with, of course, the Comet staff, Eric Harris and Tanisha, to try and identify routes that are underperforming so that we can create a temporary hold on those routes that are underperforming. That was the first step. We started that back on February 8th to take a look at those ridership numbers to see whether or not that would be beneficial. The challenges that we ran into there came from not being able to pull apart what we refer to as inner lines and blocks. That became a challenge that would disrupt other services. And so we had to refrain from that as it stands. So in part, we have been aggressively from our TP dev side, we've been aggressively looking at receiving operators from other properties. And I'm glad that we are in the effort right now of establishing some start dates going into next week to be able to get some folks from North Carolina, as well as we're taking a look at the possibility of getting some folks from one of our other contracts in Colorado to help us out with some staffing. But in addition to that, we have a significant number of individuals undergoing training right now. We have a total of 9 that are receiving training, and they will have the opportunity to be released with training between the end of this month and the beginning of next month. And that will help us to fix that process. In addition, we've had some meetings with John Andow and the rest of the Comet staff, and we recently received the clearance to make changes towards the run cut process to reevaluate the run cut itself and try and make changes into that portion of the system. And so we are currently in the process of redoing the run cut. We are working with our team to make sure that we can try and reduce the number of routes, the number of part-time routes that we have in order to, again, reallocate those undercovered routes to operators that we currently have available in our system. The plan at this point is to start seeing those changes take shape into next week with being able to provide actual start dates and of course, additional progress as we move forward. Right now, and looking at some of those efforts that we have going on, we're looking at possibly mid-March to see some of those things start, excuse me, not mid-March, mid-April, to see some of those efforts take shape and start to provide some decent impact. And of course, the main changes with service changes, I should say, schedule changes on our part with the run cut taking into effect during the course of April as well. So this is definitely an ongoing effort. When you're looking at the operator staffing and the challenges we've had in the past with not being able to recruit the appropriate number of operators since the start of this contract, because of course, the requirements for the operator criteria, we do see with the new changes and the amended piece of the operator criteria that we currently have, being able to turn the corner. To give you an idea, we currently have 7 individuals that are scheduled for training to start next week. And since we've changed this criteria, we are definitely starting to get more operators through the door to be able to fix this piece for the long haul.
Okay, well, I mean, the initiatives that you're taking to supplement the staff for a while and to recruit new ones and to get people new on board and the modifications, all of those sound positive. Can you tell me kind of what the status is now in terms of just the big numbers, the total number of operators that would be fully staffed and where we stand at the moment? I know I hear what you're saying about a lot of things being in process.
Yes. Right now, we're short 11 to 12 operators, and we're talking about that based on the current run cut and the open pieces of work that we have based on our current operator staffing. In the ideal world, you want to make sure that you have an extra board to be able to, of course, prepare for operators who call off sick for whatever reason. Right now, we have 10 individuals that are out due to FMLA, COVID, situations like that. And that is an ongoing thing for every transit authority, to be honest with you. So for us, we are trying to get to the point where we have at least a 20% extra board. And so the plan that we've been working on right now is to try and have that in place by June. Of course, and I say that because as time goes on, you do lose some operators, whether it be relocation or family challenges, or this job isn't just isn't what they had anticipated. To give you an idea, typically you lose 50% of your employment pool with every step, from the interview process to the background check to the drug screens to the training, and then after 90 days, you have a tendency to lose your pool dramatically with each step. So as those things transpire during the course of the hiring and getting people in, we do see this being a moving target, give or take about 2 to 3% based on the number of operators that we are currently hiring. Yeah, that's about what we have.
Okay. Did any of you have questions for Mr. Bell?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Bell, is the minimum age for CDL licenses?
Right now, I believe that is 22. It depends on insurance and state. I've got a feeling it's 22 for here. We always look for folks that are CDL certified because that reduces the amount of training that they need. When we have an operator come off the street that is not CDL certified, it takes anywhere between 4 to 5 weeks, where a CDL operator, it only takes 3. So it's a lot faster for us to get somebody that's CDL qualified.
And the reason I ask you that question, a lot of these college students were bus drivers in high school, and a lot of them were rural area bus drivers.
Yes, and
have we taken a chance of recruiting at the colleges for part-time bus drivers?
Yes, I actually just had a meeting with with a representative at the college and was talking about that and wanting to see if we could do some recruitments. So we're going to start having routine meetings here coming up, and that is going to be a #1 topic to see how we can get more operators to be recruited to be able to provide service, not just for them, but for us as well, because we want to make sure that we're doing some cross training here and of course, keep things fluid, we like to say.
But tell me this, well, you said you made some contacts. Who did you contact on the college?
There was Esther, who's a primary person.
So you're talking about mainly the
I don't
university?
know Esther. Now, who's Esther?
Yes.
So she's with the University of South Carolina. I recognize that name. But
Yes.
I know Mr. Fergus is also interested in some of the other colleges.
College.
Go ahead, Mr. Fergus.
Yeah, you know, got several colleges around here, even Columbia College, Benedict College, Webster, Allen University, the Midland Tech. You know,
yes, sir. That's
back in Midland Tech.
Yes, sir. That's definitely an avenue for us. Being new here, these are one of the multitude of different avenues that we're looking at and working with our HR department as well as our corporate staff to make sure we're getting the resources in those areas. We rely heavily on multiple needs. So that is definitely one we'll look at.
And I'm thinking too, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Will Brennan. Just wanted to interject to Mr. Fergus's point. Other CDL outlets out there. Department of Corrections has a wonderful CDL program. I encourage you to reach out to the Department of Corrections and their reentry programs.
Oh, that's a good thought. Thank you, Will. I was thinking too that the technical colleges usually have a higher percentage of what we might call non-traditional students in terms of age, and that may be a more fruitful area if the minimum age is 22. Among undergraduates, you might not find as many of those, except in places where they have a higher number of students who are not just straight out of high school age students. But that direction about the Department of Corrections, that may help us solve more than one problem at once.
Definitely.
Madam Chair.
If I can also add, we are in discussions with Midland Technical College in relation to developing a bus operator class, which would allow members of the community to sign up for this class, and they will be trained to get a Class B license, and the curriculum would be the South Carolina Department of Motor Vehicles Commercial Driver's Handbook. And once this class is established, it can potentially create a pool of people that could potentially work here.
That kind of stream of workforce coming in would be really wonderful. That'd be great. So good.
So we've met with their senior provost of continuing education to get that course started. So they're talking internally on how it can be implemented, the cost, and the next steps. So we'll be collaborating with our ATP Dev in that, since there's a provision in their contract that they're supposed to provide an instructor for that class.
John, this is Will Brennan again. Please coordinate with City of Columbia. Columbia Water and our Public Works are always looking for CDL certified employees. So we would love to contribute into that.
Definitely.
So you think they may have some candidates? Will, you think they may have some people who've applied there?
No, we're always looking. We have a shortage of folks with CDL. We're looking. So the demand is out there.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions? I was thinking, the comment staff John, you and the comment staff may be to chime in on this one. Mr. Bell, I was understanding you to say that when you really have been in a crunch, you've been looking at what are underperforming routes. And I know that for this committee knows well that that we aren't at liberty to start and stop service on a dime, that we have a whole process of when we have to go through any kind of service changes. And so I'm wondering if John maybe can speak to what happens when you're in a a situation where you don't have the drivers to run the routes that are scheduled? Or both of you, Mr. Bell, you and John may speak to that.
I can elaborate a little bit more. Typically in the industry, from an operations standpoint, you always end up creating what we refer to as a cut list. That cut list is very simple. When you have a multiple number of buses performing one route, and let's say for this instance, 4 buses on one route performing a headway of 15 minutes. That means there's a bus showing up every 15 minutes. That way, when you do have a route that is not performing large ridership, and 1 or 2 of those buses are experiencing, low ridership, to where those operators and resources can be allocated to an area where you are short, or you have a higher demand for a certain period of time, you would change your headways from a basically 15-minute headway, 4 buses, down to a 30-minute headway of 2 buses, or an hour headway of 1 bus. So you're not eliminating the entire route. You're only reducing it based on what the ridership demand is for a short period of time. And that is typically what happens in a lot of agencies across the country, where that way customer service has the information in advance when you have the need to be able to do a cut list, and you're able to make sure that the customers are aware along those routes based on road supervisors providing notification via placards, or of course, operators sharing information when they're picking and dropping off passengers during those times of the day, for ever how long that route will be impacted for that purpose.
Okay, so it sounds like that the cut list is really a pre-agreed upon set of routes, that, because I know this can't be a unilateral decision of either the contractor or the Comet without other people being involved. So you have a list of routes that are potential for a cut list. Is that how it works?
Yes, and that's one of the things that we definitely want to do moving forward. And I've actually already initiated talks with our with the representative that helps us do our run cuts, is to identify runs that are set up for a cut list in the event of an emergency. And obviously, we don't want to be in an emergency with short operators.
Right,
but
right.
if there was another pandemic, God forbid, there was an opportunity to do that, to cover for service elsewhere, we can. And identifying those in advance just talks about the proactive nature from an operations standpoint. And unfortunately, we were not in a position to be able to do that with some of the challenges that we had with technology, the transition from clever devices, those kinds of things, I think kind of played into some of this. And of course, this was our first run cut that we instituted since the start of this contract.
Yeah.
So, Madam Chairman, if I
yes.
can just add, and this is something that we talked about as well. In relation to the cut list, normally in a larger agency, when you have multiple buses running multiple routes, it's
I was
much more
thinking that buses every 15 minutes sounded like paradise to us.
That list works appropriately, but with the Comet system, close to 80% of the system runs 1 bus per route per hour. Mm-hmm. So, and the only routes that have multiple buses are the routes that operate with 30-minute headways on major corridors: North Main, Sparrows, Two Notch, Forest, Broad River. And in those cases, those are our higher performing routes. So this is where we would need direction from the committee, that if you want to have a formalized cut list, are you wanting to cut lower performing routes, which will leave areas of the transit service area without service? Or do you want to reduce the higher performing routes to 1-hour headways so you can free up the personnel to cover the routes in the outlying area, so that the entire service area still maintains some level of baseline service?
Well, I will just say, John, that that is a huge decision, and I certainly don't think that we are in a position to be ready to make some sort of recommendation here at this, right in the middle of this meeting. But that also sounds very much like the kind of decision making that we'll have to face when we listen to the report on the long-term plan, and that will come up at our board meeting just in the next couple of weeks. So I would ask the committee members to really be thinking seriously about the question that John raises, because it's part of that production coverage major question, but it also has an immediacy, as Mr. Bell points out, if you're confronted on a day-to-day basis with routes that you don't have drivers to cover.
Now, Ms. Mood, of course, to put a little clarity to it, everything that John references is on point. And in this system, it's a little bit unique. It's safe to say right now, where we are is based on the lack of operators. And so with the new hiring standards that we have and being able to select more operators, there's a huge probability that we are not going to be in a position like this again. And I'm saying that loosely because I do believe with some of the operators that we're bringing on and the fact that we're getting more applicants that are eligible now, it's definitely going to change the face of how we deliver service in the future.
Well, it's a great relief to me to hear that we feel like we're going to be paddling faster and getting out of this situation, that this won't be an ongoing experience. And I think that gives us a little bit of breathing room to make the kind of big decision on coverage and production that we do, as a board, do need to make. So anybody else have any comments or questions on this item?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Did we reduce those requirements in driving records?
The revisions in the requirements, Mr. Bell, you want to speak specifically to that? You talked about the modifications in the requirements for drivers.
Yes, it was changed from a zero, basically zero violations. They had to have a clean motor vehicle record. And now it allows for 2 moving violations, making sure that, of course, they're not significant. I think, and if my memory serves me correct, 1 moving violation and a possible incident or accident, depending upon the magnitude. Just depends on how it's read through the Department of Transportation for South Carolina. So we're able to screen through those and make those identifications to make sure that it meets these new requirements, and it is opening the door right now.
Ms. Mood, I just want to clarify on that comment that actually the contract said no moving violations, and it wasn't.
For what period of time, John? For what period of time?
It wasn't defined, nor was the definition of moving violations defined. So there was a difference of interpretation of moving violations. So in the latest change order, we defined moving violations as what is defined by South Carolina Department of Motor Vehicles, and then added the 2 moving violations. So I just want to make sure it's clear that it wasn't no infractions. The contract previously just said no moving violations, which was undefined.
And isn't that the change order that the board approved?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
So by adding that South Carolina language, now gave clarity to RATP Dev to follow the state law when defining moving violations, and it also allowed them to accept people with 2 or more within a specific year period.
Okay. Does that clarify for the other board members? I mean, other committee members, you have questions?
Miss Mood, also, I apologize since, of course, I'm fairly new here. I know that there was some history involved in this, and I think our regional VP, Steve Scher, could share some in light of this subject.
Okay, I didn't get the very last of that. Did you say someone else could could add
Yes,
to this?
the history and clarification of what was interpreted
Yes,
is definitely was before my time, and
yes.
Steve Scherer, our regional
Oh,
VP, was here at the start, and I think he can share a little bit about that as well. I believe he's on the call.
Okay, fine. Thanks. Mr. Sherrill?
Thank you, Ms. Muth, and the rest of the committee members. I appreciate the opportunity to add a couple comments. So the original contract on July the 1st outlined no moving violations for a continuous 3-year period, and a safe driving record is determined by us, the contractor. So RATP Dev certainly took the 3-year restriction on moving violations seriously, because it was made very clear to us that was the new expectation, both in conversation as well as an email communication. So to help the committee kind of understand how we got where we are, when we took over the contract, or started transitioning the contract in late May, early June, we didn't have access to employee driving records because they weren't our employees. So as we started transitioning those employees and performing motor vehicle record checks at the beginning of June, there were several employees that were identified that no longer met the contractual requirements to be either a bus operator or a technician, a mechanic on the contract. So through conversation, it was made very clear to us that those people would no longer be eligible to work under this contract. We did come to an agreement very late in the game. I believe it was the day before the service was planning on transitioning, so June 30th, that there would be a temporary relaxation for those existing employees. That would allow us to let those folks continue to work on July the 1st. But that lasted through February, I think it was actually January the 31st, 2021. So that actually allowed us to keep some of those existing employees, but the new requirements did not allow us to hire any operators or any safety sensitive employees unless they had the 0 moving violations in a continuous period of 3 years. Mm-hmm. There was never a point where RATP Dev denied a potential employee for a non-moving violation. So let's say a seatbelt violation or a parking ticket. These employees that came to us seeking employment had legitimate moving violations on their records, so speeding tickets, different moving violations that made them ineligible. However, they held CDLs in good standing. And so what we did after the board recently approved modification 6 to our contract that allowed the relaxation of hiring criteria that Mr. Ando mentioned, we went back through applicants from the past, and we were able to bring on several applicants that under the previous requirements were no longer eligible. We've also continued, as Mr. Bell explained, to recruit, and so we've got a good number of operators that are now in training and that are slated to graduate from training in the coming weeks. So the relaxation of the hiring requirements made it much easier for us to fill these positions, and we're in a position now where we working with the comment, we do believe that we can get to that light at the end of the tunnel because we have a steady flow of applicants coming in. So
good.
We appreciate the modification to the contract that allowed us to do that.
Well, thank you for filling in that information for us, and I appreciate that. Okay, I'm going to move us then on to the to item 9C on the soda cap connector service. John.
Yes.
And this is going back to one of the motions that was to the committee from the board?
Yeah, page 64 of your packet, Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee. This service started in 2017 with 2 routes, and it has been modified continuously since then. The system now consists of 4 routes. Route 1, which basically services Main Street, Vista, West Columbia, and Casey. Route 2, which serves Main Street, 5 Points, and the Waverly neighborhood. Route 3, which serves Segra Park during Segra Park games. And Route 4, which is a downtown orbit, which travels primarily.
Mr. Ando.
Yes.
What part of Waverly does the soda cap connector serve?
We're talking about Route 2.
Yes.
It travels on Taylor to Hardin, serves Allen University, Benedict College, 5 Points neighborhood, and then comes back through U of SC to downtown.
When you go down Hardin Street, that's not Waverly. So we shouldn't be putting that impression out there that it's servicing Waverly. That is not.
Okay, so rather than Waverly,
Even Taylor Street is not Waverly.
So it just needs to describe the actual roads that the soda cap runs on.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, John, you want to go ahead?
Route 4 does an orbit on Richland, Sumter, Assembly, and Blossom Street. We suspended soda cap connector service briefly when the pandemic hit in March of 2020. We restored Route 1 due to complaints that were received that people were not able to access West Columbia, Casey, House of Rayford, and jobs along Gervais Street. And then when the board authorized entering into a contract with U of SC, we then in September restored Route 4, which connected people from Comet Central to the U of SC transit system. Based on the performance of soda cap connectors since the pandemic, we're presently only running 2 routes of soda cap connectors. That's Route 1 and 4. Route 2 remains suspended, and Route 3 has not begun because there's been no games at Segra Park. And Route 3 is a contractual route that we have with the Columbia Fireflies. The performance has been fairly lukewarm. It's barely meeting the performance standards. Route 1 has between June and January has averaged about 6.5 passenger trips per hour, and Route 4, since its restoration, has averaged about 7 passengers per hour.
And remind us, the committee, of the standard for the connectors.
8 passengers per hour.
8, okay.
Should the committee recommend to the board to continue to suspend the entire soda cap connector system, it would create connectivity issues for people trying to access Casey and West Columbia, since they do contribute to the overall cost of Route 1. And then as it relates to Route 4, it would create frequency issues as it relates to people trying to connect to popular downtown destinations, including U of SC and destinations along Assembly Street. So I'll be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Okay, are there any questions from the committee?
I'd like to reinstate my motion to eliminate the soda cap connectors until we get back to free paying fares.
All right, so you're making a motion, Mr. Fergus, to suspend all soda cap routes until we restore fare service?
That's correct.
Is that your motion?
That's correct.
Is there a second to that motion? I'm not hearing a second, so the motion would fail for lack of a second.
Madam Chairwoman, if I may add, the Finance Committee met earlier this morning, and they will be
Yes.
recommending to the board to restore fares effective April 12th.
Okay. So in light of that information that fares would be restored in April, do we have any other motions to make of a recommendation we want to make to the board on this assignment they've given us?
I'm not clear. What is the assignment for? Is it to look
Well, the
at
motion.
consolidating Gamecock and Soda? Where are we?
No, John, would you read again the motion, what the board asked the service committee to do on this?
The board asked the service committee to study the potential suspension of soda cap connector service due to low ridership.
Okay.
So the pandemic ended.
All right, so they asked us to study that, so then our action, any action we take on this would be a recommendation back to the board on that issue.
Understood. So studying any other delivery model for the soda cap would be a whole nother round of motion and.
Exactly. We're not in a position to change the service, but yes.
Following the trends shown on page 67 of the packet, it appears that the ridership on soda cap connecting is slowly coming back. It's not to the levels it was pre-pandemic, but it's coming back, and it's providing those connectivity needs that if those routes were not there, there would be a gap in service for comment riders to get to destinations in KC, West Columbia, and to the university.
Well, and the pattern of slowly coming back seems to be consistent with the pattern that Eric described for us for the system overall. So I'm in listening to all of this, my inclination would be to welcome a motion that would to recommend to the board that we with the caveat that we're soon going to restore fare service, that we would not recommend a suspension of the pattern of soda cap service at present. Does that make any sense?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
My concern with it, especially since it's being misidentified, you know, when you use Waverly, and I go back years with this, you use Waverly, and the only, I know where 95 to 98% of your riders are, and you use Waverly, and that both, the only two stops in Waverly are Hardin and Taylor, and Hampton and Hardin. And for the past several months, the only ridership on soda cap has been the homeless, because nobody's riding it. And we still talking about a service that we initiated as a free one for commercial things. Now I'm hearing get to West Columbia, get to Casey. That wasn't what Soda Cap Connector was established for.
Well, I hear you, Mr. Burgess, and I do recognize that we've had changes in the entire service system since we initiated the first soda cap connector. But let me see if I can sort this out a little bit. I think your point about the descriptor of Route 2, which is currently suspended, that I don't think we need a motion to ask the staff just to correct the description of that route so that it doesn't describe it as serving Waverly, but simply describes exactly where the route runs. So I think we can do that without a motion, just as a direction to staff. And then the second part, I think, in terms of what the board had asked of us, is that I would entertain a motion that says that at this point in time, the service committee does not recommend a change in the soda cap service as we're currently providing it. And granted that the rationale behind that, it does have to do with connectivity to new services that have developed since through the origin of the soda cap. So Is anybody willing to make that motion?
I will make that motion. I'm not sure if I can repeat it verbatim, though.
Well, essentially, it would be a motion to make no changes in soda cap service from what is currently being provided for the present.
Right. I will move that we do not make any changes to the soda cap connection from what is currently being provided.
Now, Madam Chair, does that eliminate Hardin Street?
Well, right now the Route 2 is in suspension now. So so what? That's why
So in other
this
words,
is also
Mr.
time.
Horatio is taking the bus, making a motion for the service to leave that area where the majority of the bus riders are.
Actually, and I don't want to give intent to Allison when she's trying to rephrase something that I've been talking about, but all that I think we're doing is to say, you know, we're right at this point where the service is gradually increasing. We've had changes in the system that make the soda cap an issue of connectivity with other routes. We are about to reinstate fares, according to John's report from the Finance Committee. And so I think the position that I see us in is not taking any new action on the soda cap at this point in time. Now what our other alternative is just not to have a motion, and I just report this discussion to the board.
No, it's always nice to see where people stand.
All right, so Allison, you want to restate your motion?
So as I understand it, what the intent of the motion is just to keep the soda cap service as it is for now until the fares are reinstated and we can reassess, you know, ridership and that sort of thing.
All right, so the basic part of the motion is just to make no changes in the soda cap for now.
Correct.
Okay, that would simplify it. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
All right, so that's seconded. Have a motion that's seconded. Any further discussion? All right, then I think we need a roll call vote on this one. Pam, please.
Okay. Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Ms. Horatio?
Yes.
Mr. Burgess?
No.
Ms. Gleason? Put her on speaker.
Ms. Gleason?
Hang on a second. Ms. Gleason?
Yes,
Did y'all hear
Yes.
her? Okay.
I can hear now. I always focused like I could hear Hawk good, but I couldn't hear what the person was saying. But thank you so much.
You're welcome. So yes for Ms. Gleason. Ms. Mood?
Yes.
Thank you, Miss Mood. I can hear you now well.
Ms. Robinson?
No, she's not a voting member, so that
Oh,
covers
sorry.
the voting.
Okay, sorry about that.
You just need, yeah, I think you got
So
it.
the motion carried.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you so much. And we'll go on down to now to the 9D. And I want to say, I'll just say at this point, I'm very aware that we've passed the 1 hour mark, but I really am hesitant to not cover some of the rest of the items on our agenda. So I hope you'll just hang with us today, and we'll try very hard not to have as heavy an agenda in future meetings, but I'd like for us to catch up today if you can stay with us. So let's move on to 9D, which is the key personnel process. This is one where in your package, you'll see that the process that was outlined in our documents, in the comment documents, required the review of any potential appointments by the contractor to key personnel positions, that those then would be referred to the service committee to evaluate whether they met the contract requirements, that the ED could be asked to vet those, to have an interview, that we would make a recommendation back to the board, and that the board would approve the key positions. In the transition and in the subsequent personnel changes, what we found was that was a very cumbersome process, and at a time when both the contractor and Comet were eager to have key personnel in place, we found our processes actually being an obstacle to that happening. And so what we've been doing for the past few months is to, essentially, waive those requirements. I mean, the contractor has made available the resumes to both the ED and the service committee, and then we have simply allowed those people to go ahead and be appointed to their positions without going through the original process I described. And so this is the question before us is whether, in fact, we want to make to revamp our original process and propose a new process for what the board and the service committee and the ED do with potential appointments by the contractor to key positions, or do we want to make a change in that process formally so that it matches what we're doing now, or do we want to go back to what we were doing? What I'm thinking is, at this point in our process today, what we may need to do is to have the staff work on well, let me get a feeling of the group first, because rather than trying to spell out the exact process, I think what I just need from the committee is whether you want us to go back to our original process, or whether you want the staff to propose a modified process for our actions regarding key personnel positions. If I get your sense of that, then we know whether to, how to proceed from there. So any thoughts on this key personnel approval process?
This is Allison. I would say that I would support seeking a modification that more closely resembles what we're currently doing.
Okay, thanks, Allison. Any other thoughts on that? Any difference of opinion?
On those key personnel persons we were using temporary. Is that what you were saying?
Well, Ms. Gleaton, we had a combination of things going on. Sometimes they were interim appointments, sometimes they were permanent appointments. So we've sort of had a mix of the two for the most recent past. But what I'm thinking is, if we could just ask John, the staff, to draw up a modified, a proposed modification in the key personnel appointments process that we could then consider at our next meeting, how would that be?
Right, I agree. Yeah.
Does that sound reasonable to everybody? I don't think we need to handle this in terms of a motion if we're just going to consider modifications and we're not spelling them out here. Does that sound reasonable?
I think that's a very good suggestion.
Okay, but John, and Pam and Leroy, whoever needs to be involved in this, could you just draft something for us to look at our next meeting?
Yes, Madam Chairwoman. I'll have Leroy and Tanisha work on that.
Good.
And have them collaborate with you on drafting what that should look like.
That's good. And we'll put that on the agenda for our April meeting. Thank you very much. All right. Now, the next one is 9F, and A is the on-time performance. And this involves some also looking at some of the IT issues. So I think, Mr. Bell, you're the lead on this one too. Could you tackle that one to tell us where we are with on-time performance, and
Sure.
and also we have in our packet a proposed kind of way to proceed from both the Comet and RapDev, which we asked them to bring to us. So if you could just walk through the RapDev part of that, Mr. Bell and John, if you have things to add from the Comet's perspective, could you do that?
Sure, no problem. No problem, ma'am. Right now, fixed route for the month of January was at 51%. And I know in the previous meetings we've shared the challenges that we experienced technology-wise. And of course, we are currently in the process of transitioning over from Clever devices to strategic mapping in order to help resolve those issues. Right now, there's over 32 vehicles that have been completed and for the installation of strategic mapping. They're averaging about 3 vehicles per day. And so there's almost 60 vehicles left to be installed. As they get through that process, obviously the month of February is going to be a challenge with information on the on-time performance. So we are taking steps to try and utilize our road supervisors to check various time points to help out with a manual recording of on-time performance. That's a little challenging, obviously, at this time because of our operator staffing and road soups having to assist with service. But as we start to see our operators get released from training and we get those relief operators, we'll be able to repurpose those supervisors to help out with improving the manual recording of on-time performance. Again, the technology of strategic mapping was definitely a challenge as we were going into January because of the length of time it took for Clever devices to update the service schedules into their system so that it could be recording, of course, the OTP. And the new service schedule was not updated into the system during the month of January. It wasn't finished until February 8th. So it was kind of sporadic during the month of January, which helps, that contributes to why we are running low numbers of 51% on-time performance for the month. But from a paratransit standpoint, however, we're still operating above plan, and that is at 96.4% for the month of January.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bell. And John?
Yeah, to add on that, I just want to make sure that there's a distinction between Clever and strategic mapping. In relation to the data from Clever devices, that was done in accordance with the timeliness of the service change. Once the data has been done by Clever, it needs to be uploaded into 58 buses. And there was a delay in getting them uploaded in 58 buses. And actually, as of last week, 57 of the 58 buses have been done. But now that we're in the transition to strategic mapping, at this point, I want to just deem Clever irrelevant. And the reason why I say that is because every time we install a strategic mapping unit, a Clever device unit is being removed, which is going to overall impact the OTP reporting. So for the month of March and April, we're not going to be able to give you OTP reporting from a technology standpoint because of this installation change. But starting in May, when the entire 89 vehicle fleet has strategic mapping installed, we should be able to give some better sense of OTP rating for the entire system, now that every bus would have one.
Okay.
And then in your packet on page number 93 shows you how that fixed route ITS solution is ultimately going to look once everything is done. And you'll see under strategic mapping, many of the features are going to be integrated with strategic mapping, which reduces the number of independent ITS solutions that the Comet and the contractor have to manage ultimately. And we'll be using the course of March and April and May to train Comet staff and contractor staff on how to utilize the strategic mapping system. But starting now, we are phasing out clever devices, and the system will become irrelevant hopefully by April.
Okay, so so what I'm hearing you say is that the new system should be fully installed, people trained, producing good data by May.
So by the time we present in May, we should be able to give you a preliminary report from strategic mapping that's reporting on all 89 vehicles.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that in the interim, what Mr. Bell was saying was that they would be making an effort to do checks by their supervisors on on-time performance. And I mean, I know this is important, not just for our evaluation as the service committee, but actually for making sure the service is running as they intended, as all of us intended to run. So so Mr. Bell and John, could you say what degree of effort do you feel like is really warranted in doing that manual tabulation for the interim?
It's going to be a large manual effort, and so much so that we're going to have to determine if we're going to focus attention on primary routes and do random snapshots of different stops for those particular routes, or are we going to focus our attention on main locations like Comet Central and looking at the OTP at those locations. It's just that we have to determine exactly what are going to be the primary ones of which to register as we go through this transition.
Okay, I'll ask the committee if you'll allow me to just ask Mr. Bell and John to get together and agree on what kind of oversight, what sort of tracking they both think is reasonable to do for the interim until the new technology is installed. Could we ask you to do that, please, and just bring back to us at the next meeting what you agreed upon would be an adequate manual oversight for the interim?
Now, Ms. Mood, one thing that I do need to advise to you is that even in a manual approach, when you track on-time performance, you're tracking on-time performance against every trip that is operated in the transit system.
Right.
At least on the fixed route side. And right now, we're not operating 100% of all of the trips in the fixed route system. So in theory, even the reporting from a manual perspective, while it's helpful to give us a concept, it is going to ultimately be misleading to the committee, because if you hear like a number of 86%, it's going to be 86% of the trips that truly ran. But when you factor in the trips that did not run, that 86% could drop to as low again as 50% because we had all those missed trips due to lack of operators. So we just want to be mindful and careful on how we present this data to you until we get confirmation that 100% of all fixed route transit trips are operating.
I think that's really what I'm asking the two of you to try to spell out for us so that we know exactly what we're looking at, as well as those important considerations that you're pointing out, John, so that it's not misleading. But what I want is what I'm hopeful that we can have is that you all come to an agreement about exactly what kind of monitoring will you be doing just to assure that the operations of the service are running on time as well as you can, without diverting the time of people that we need to be actually doing the operation to the monitoring. I mean, I'm not saying this very well, but
no, I think I understand what you're stating, and we'll convene a meeting with our HQ staff on how we can come up with that.
We know that for this interim, it's going to be imperfect. So we're not, I don't think I get what you're saying. But if you can just come back to us and say at our next meeting, this is what we agreed upon in terms of how we would monitor manually until the new technology is fully installed. And this is what we learned from that monitoring. If you would just do that for our next meeting.
We could do that. Well,
okay, does that sound okay to the rest of the committee?
Ms. Mood, the only problem I have is for years we get to this point that when we get down to on-time performance, ridership, something's not working, something's not installed. Now, we've carried that maybe 3 years and still so, but we've made major changes in the system the past 2-3 years, changing routes, cutting routes, and none of our data is any good. Ridership, revenue, because we went free a whole year, but yet we're still making changes. And somebody's suffering with these changes. So I think the board needs to, get and put some input in this, because we're hearing this too much, that this data is in error.
Well, I agree with you that it seems that we've had perpetual technology problems for a long time. And in each time we come up with what we think will be the solution, it hadn't achieved everything that we want it to. But where we find ourselves right now is in the midst of, as you point out, another series of changes. At the same time, we are in this transition period, and with the pandemic and a lot of stuff mixed in. So I think all I'm asking is that we cover this the best we can for the interim, give us the best data they can give us by manually monitoring for on-time performance, and then hold to that by May that we should have good data coming from the new technology. And I will certainly report on this to the board from this meeting. So are we okay to leave it with that?
Ms. Mood, I have a question. This is Carol.
Yes, Ms. Gleason. Yes.
Okay. We have an IT person that's working with this, that's going to help us come up with this data.
Ms. Gleason, yes, we have, actually, you're going to be hearing a presentation from our data management consultant in relation to validating the data. But we at the Commons do have an IT manager, and RATP Dev has 2 IT positions to also manage the IT solutions.
Okay.
So it's got to be a collective effort of all of those folks, right?
Okay, all right.
Does that answer your question, Ms. Green?
Clarification. Yes, ma'am. I wanted to get some clarification on that, because you need an IT person on that.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, and we made this change a year ago because we realized that this hodgepodge of IT solutions was starting to become a problem, and the reliability of the data from all these legacy IT systems that were previously procured was starting to become a challenge for Commons staff to manage without having the knowledge of how to fundamentally operate those IT systems.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so are we ready to move on then to the next item, which is customer complaints? And I just wanted to I mean, we have in our packet the pages of complaints, and so we really have 2 standards related to customer complaints. RAPDAV has a standard of how many complaints per number of, I can't remember what the denominator is now, but in terms of the
10,000 passengers.
10,000 passengers. That's one standard. And then we have another standard that says when complaints come in, there's a standard for how quickly we investigate and respond to those complaints. And so really what your packet shows you is a list of what speaks to that standard. So I can ask Mr. Bell to tell us about where they are with meeting the standard of complaints per 10,000. And then I can ask Tanisha to report on where we are with meeting the standard for response to complaints. And then I want to add, so let's hear from them first, and then I want to add something that I hope we can do in addition. But Mr. Bell, would you just tell us where you are with the standard on the number of complaints per 10,000 passengers?
Right now, for the month of January, we finished at 4.01 complaints per 10,000 with a targeted goal of 6 per 10,000. We know that February is in calculation right now, and it's definitely going to be higher because of the service change. But in January, we were below that requirement.
Okay.
The one of the areas of note was the two highest marks for the month was, of course, reliability was at 17 and friendliness was at 12. The lowest areas that were brought in was cleanliness at 3 and then planning and service at 2. So we have a lot of general complaints that was at 9, and we had some safety complaints that were at 8. So for the most part, January seemed decent. We want to, of course, get into the reliability, as we all know, and of course, take a look at some of what the generals are to try and redefine them if necessary, based on the details of those complaints.
Thank you. Do you have a question for Mr. Bell? Okay, John, you want Tanisha, do you want to report to us on the complaint response?
Yes, Mr. Bell is correct with his numbers. For the complaint responses for January, of course, the most is where's my bus? Same for February, where's my bus? Including going into March because of the state of the service. So as I'm looking through the comments or the responses by RATP Dev, some of the responses, they are getting back with the customers, but what I'm noticing is some responses are general comments being put into the system, as in we may have to get with the customer to teach them how to ride the bus, but there's no viewing of the cameras or operator names listed if they are in violation. So we're just going to have to get together and discuss some of those items with the general comments.
Okay. Well, actually, what your report, Tanisha, really leads me into just the thoughts that I had after reviewing this data, because I think we have to we look at those two measures of those two standards, but then really the complaint data gives us an opportunity to be detectives, I would say, in terms of tracking down what patterns we see that would lead us to say, how do we make a more focused response to prevent some of the complaints, and as Mr. Bell pointed out, they really do cluster. When I did my own math on this list of 228 complaints that we've gotten since the 1st of January, 124 of those, 54.3%, were what I called service disruption complaints. You know, that's putting together, was the bus early or late? Did it not show up? Did it pass me by? You know, collecting all of those individual things into one to say, was the service disrupted at some point? And I hear what you're saying, Tanisha, in terms of looking at the complaint response. I mean, we knew the service was disrupted, and so that really just confirmed the overall picture that we got. So that's the big one. And when I looked at the next one, I think Mr. Bell labels this collective type friendliness. I was counting the ones that were either said that the driver was discourteous or inattentive. Those were the things that I put in that category, and that was our next biggest one, and that was 16.6% of the complaints. And then the next one fell into, I would call safety, but really those that Mr. Bell pointed out are the two big areas for focus. So I would like to, and I don't know who does this kind of analysis, but I would really like for the rap dev and our staff to, whether it's the QA for rap dev and our Eric, your analysis on ours, but to put your heads together to look at what patterns are showing up. Are there any patterns in these complaints by route or by driver or by the day of the week, or from what Mr. Bell told me about, told us about coverage, does it vary by morning or an afternoon routes? What are the patterns by complainants? Are we getting lots of complaints from one person, or a lot of different people complaining about the same thing? So those really trying to focus in on another level of analysis, and that may be of what you were speaking to, Mr. Bell, was and Tanisha, to see what is the pattern that we see here, because it lets us have a more focused prevention strategy than to just have a kind of a scattershot picture of the whole system. So I guess all I'm doing is just reinforcing what you've really already said in terms of being able to look at more detail and identify these patterns so you can focus the intervention. So those are really just my comments on it. Does anybody else on the committee want to speak to the complaints? Okay, hearing none. That takes us to the solutions for transit and data analytics. And I know Mr. Kuhn was on the line with us from there. John, do you want to introduce this topic?
Yes. Recognizing that there's been concerns with data consistency and how the data is coming from various systems that the Common has previously procured, we went and sought quotes from various vendors to see who can provide a transit data management solution so we can start consolidating data into one database, be able to validate and verify the data so that when we're presenting information that we have a consistent source of information with everything matching up. This is important for when we report to state agencies, federal agencies, and also to the board of directors. We ended up providing a purchase order to Solutions for Transit. They are based in California, and they are providing the data analytics necessary so that when we're reporting data information to those various agencies, that it's being done in a consistent, concise manner. Bobby Kuhn and Kerry Wilson are the proprietors of Solutions for Transit, and they can talk about the reporting solution and the work that they've done with the Commons since June of 2020. Bobby and Kerry.
Okay, thank you, John. Madam Chair, and guests in the service committee, the guests of the service committee. I'm Bobby Kuhn, and with me is Kerry Wilson.
Hello.
So real fast, I want to tell you who we are. Both Kerry and I, we don't consider ourselves consultants. We both retired after 25 years in public transportation. We both retired as directors, high-level positions. And after we retired, we started working with transit agencies like yourself to help them comply with federal regulations. We both have, like I said, worked with FTA for many, many years. Kerry worked directly with FTA and NTD. So that really is our background. So now what we do, again, we help agencies comply. The reporting solution, as John said, is your data management system. Most transit agencies now have gone to a data management system so that they can analyze data from multiple sources against each other. And it just makes it so you can see the whole package. I believe you all have documents in front of you. What these documents are exact federal requirements and where to find these federal requirements. It's important for you to understand that we're not just saying things, that this is actually a federal docket. And these regulations are what you're graded against by any of your auditors. So that's what they are. And I don't need you to make notes, because you're going to find that these documents contain everything that I'm about to tell you, only I'm going to, kind of reduce it a little bit. Real fast, the master agreement that you have with FTA is where all of your funding requirements originate from. The master agreement is what tells you that you have to comply with the uniform system of accounts and records and reporting system. That is defined as NTD in further documents. NTD is the database that you record all of your information that of what you perform for the year. And NTD is very clear. It says the data, all agencies must report actual miles and hours. That language has been there for many years, but it wasn't as enforced as it is now. What the FTA has found over the years is that many of the agencies were reporting incorrect data because they were averaging, and that led to a lot of issues. So the auditors now are very strict on identifying what the actual miles and hours and what your process is for recording them. In your process for reporting, we'll move on to the next part of that, the data reconciliation and data accuracy. What the process is your contractor simply goes into a website that John provides. And when they enter the block number, it automatically populates what the scheduled times are. And then they just enter the odometer readings for 4 stops. When they leave the yard, when they get to the first stop, when they get to their last stop, and when they return to the yard. And then they would change any of the times based on exceptions. Let's say that, the bus was stopped on the way back due to a train, which seems to happen a lot there. They would just change that time. Overall, the process is anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute, depending on who makes the entries. And our system times that, or John's system times that. So we know that to be factual. Once a month has been entered into the system, well, first let's go back a little bit. Every week, the system sends back what we call an exception list back to the contractor that they can see, okay, well, this bus was on 2 different routes at the exact same time. So it was likely just the wrong bus was entered. But the system is smart enough to know what the odometer reading should be on that bus that day, because it's also looking at your maintenance records and saying, well, that couldn't have been that bus. So it's, there's logic applied to every component in the system, but the end game is that those error checks, by sending them to them weekly, or the exception list, they can go back to the driver and say, well, what really happened here? Because it's fresh in the driver's mind. So then at the end of every month, what the system does is it does a much larger comparison check. And it's looking at each of the pieces of information entered and compares it against the schedule. And John's given us a tolerance of plus or minus 5%. So if the piece of work exceeds 5%, then the exception list goes back to the contractor and says, well, why did we go over the scheduled time by more than 5%? And then they enter a comment. Our system sends those comments back to Carrie and I, and Alana, who also works with us. And we look at the comment and say, does that make transit sense? Does that comment fit what a transit industry would look for? And if we say yes, then we accept that preliminary. There we go. And at the end of the month, once we feel that all of the data meets what the requirement of FTA and NTD are, we would send that to Tanisha and Leroy, and we would say, we recommend that you approve the month based on these exceptions, and they would get a copy of those exceptions. We used to just send authorization to the contractor, but when FTA reviewed our data management system, they liked it a lot, and they thought it met the compliance regulations. But what they didn't like was that we gave the authorization. So we changed that now to, we would give the comment staff the ability to have all the information that we have just abbreviated to just the exceptions and the comments, and then they would make the decision. So once they made that decision, once they made that decision, the the invoice that they would run comes directly from John's data management system or your data management system. In fact, many of the reports that are required in your contract, Carrie has written on the data management system. So they would just run them rather than try and go gather new information. But Section 5 of your contract with RapDev defines the requirements for reporting actual miles and hours on page 152. It says each monthly payment shall be based on the actual number of in-service vehicle hours for which a contractor is billing for in that month. That language is actually required under FTA. You are required by law to notify your contractor that they are required to follow all of the, as a subrecipient, all of the requirements of the FTA master agreement and any flow down contract that comes from there. So that's why that language is there, and it's right. It's there for a reason. So what Tanisha and Leroy would be doing is looking to the database system to validate that those are actual miles and hours that are entered before they give them authorization to invoice. So the contract language in that section, like I said, it's required under the FTA master agreement. And it's also required that you notify your subcontractor, your third party participant of the language. But your contract also references several sections of section 40 or 49 USC code 5335, which is the reference to the National Transit Database. That's where all of your language has to comply with is the NTD. So the NTD language, the NTD input is done through a database. And when you enter the information for what the service that was run, what what the comment staff would enter, it actually error checks it again. So rather than you submitting that once a year for your annual reporting and finding out that you had errors 11 months ago and trying to figure them out, what John's data management system, and I keep saying John, I'm sorry, it's all of yours. What your data management system's doing is it checks those weekly so that we don't have to go back 11 months. It's actually, it's a smart system, and most transit agencies have gone to a data management system like this. So the moving on to the next section, and I'm going to let Carrie talk for a second on this, the concerns and issues over the data and solutions toward correcting it. Go ahead.
Well, when we first got there back in before July, actually, July of 2020, we recommended that all of the operators and dispatchers be trained so that they understood what was changing come July 1st when RapDev was taking over. Keeping in mind that those operators and dispatchers had worked with TransDev and they were following TransDev's guidelines and TransDev's procedures, but with the new contractor coming in, they needed to be trained as to what the new culture was, what the new expectations were. Unfortunately, during the course of the transition, there were some operators that were partially trained. There were some dispatchers that had a little bit of training. Actually, most of that training was done by us because we were on site. But there was never a concerted, we didn't see a concerted effort to really go in and train all the operators so that they were correctly filling out their DVIRs, their driver vehicle inspection report, which is where the information comes from. And that's what the dispatcher is entering into the DMS. We also noticed a trend, and I'm sure part of it came from COVID and the service being offered for free, in that a lot of the several of the operators were neglecting to either log in, or they were logging in, but they weren't counting the passengers. In order to get your ridership accurate, you have to have the operators logged into GFI and clicking on a button every time somebody gets on board. Well, we'd see whole hours go by where we knew the service was running, but the operator hadn't clicked a button the entire time. So obviously this is going to impact any decisions being made by the planning department if a route is deemed to be unproductive, if in fact the operators haven't been logging the ridership. So Eric, for instance, may see a route as being very low in ridership, where in fact it may be much higher if all of the riders were being counted. So there's a multitude of things that we see as a solution to rectifying some of the issues that continue. And first and foremost, it's getting to the source. And the source really is your operators. Your operators is kind of the starting point. The operators have to log in to count your ridership. The operators have to completely, accurately, and legibly fill out their DVIRs so that the information can be put into the DMS, the miles and the hours, the actual miles and hours that they're driving.
While we were there, we were trying to help the operators understand that if they logged onto the fare box during their pre-trip and something was wrong with the fare box, they could switch the bus out or get it corrected before they go into service. But what they were doing prior to us getting there is if they logged in at all, they may log in after the first stop or at the first stop. And if the fare box wasn't working, that meant that your passengers had to sit and wait for a replacement bus.
Or that the operator continued in service with a non-working fare box, which meant they couldn't count the passengers. So it's kind of a, we're trying to find where the source was of the issues that were transpiring between July and, and current, even now, we're still seeing some of the same type of issues. And we believe that if the operators are trained, that the dispatchers also may need some additional training. Unfortunately, during the month, I believe of September, an employee of RapDev, who's now gone, gave some direction that they should just enter everything as scheduled as opposed to actual, because that would reduce the number of errors being found by the DMS. Well, unfortunately, the DMS is smarter than that. And while the errors, one type of error may have been eliminated, it created a whole bunch of other types of errors. So it was kind of like, well, you corrected one source, but now you have a bunch of other ones, which won't be corrected unless you get the actual data, the actual miles and hours entered into the system.
So training the staff is the step in the right direction. We do see that TCS, for the month of July, they've almost completed correcting everything there. We are in constant contact with TCS. They seem really eager to move forward and getting all of these things corrected. They're talking about meeting with we'll identify any drivers that we have concerns with not logging on correctly, and they'll go meet with those drivers and start correcting those errors. So it seems like TCS is that July, we believe, is going to be done probably this week, and they've asked us to move forward immediately with August so that they can get the prior months corrected, but they're correcting the current months currently so that they've corrected the problem going forward, and then they're just going back to correct the data, which is the exact way to resolve this. So I think that the TCS side has a good path going forward. The RapDev side, we've not seen any correction of errors. We've been talking about there's 11 missing manifests from July. We've been talking for a month that possibly they could just even send us the manifest and we'll enter them for them. But we're not really getting any response to that at all. We also don't have a current schedule for the run cut that you have. We have what we believe is a schedule, and RapDev did send us a schedule that was incorrect. It had the 501 ending at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon instead of continuing for the day. We sent that back about a month ago saying these don't appear to be correct, and this is an example of why it's not correct. We worked with Eric last month on going over everything that should be there, and we're trying to validate that the run cut contains everything that's there, but we haven't gotten a good communication going forward with that. So right now, what we have in the system is our best guess at what they should be running. However, we both know they're not running everything. So normally our system could go back and look and say, well, these are pieces that are missing based on what you're running. But since they're not running everything, we can't do that either. Talking about strategic mapping for 30 seconds or less, John kind of commented that having everything into one system. We work with a lot of transit agencies on project management, on accepting systems like CAD AVL systems or GPS systems, AVL systems. What the intention is that we'll import all of the strategic mapping data into the system. I've already looked at the data, and I know that we'll be capable of providing an on-time performance report from the database. that can either be by stop or by time point or any way that you want it run. So we're excited about that. You've got some 30 buses that are already entered. If we had that connection set up, we actually could tell you of those 30 buses, which ones are providing on-time performance. And theoretically, you could rotate those buses amongst the routes and not put additional staff in, let your database do the work for you. And it's going to be a partial information anyway. So
But doing with road supervisor, it'd even be less.
it'd be even less.
Because you only have so many road supervisors who probably may be needed sometimes for driving or to deal with incidents on the road.
Yeah. If your drivers were actually logging into the fare box when they're supposed to be logging in, I could give you a partial on-time performance on whether they left the yard on time and whether they arrived at the first stop on time and whether they arrived at their last stop on time. And that is something that provides information that doesn't cost you manpower or staffing. So those are things that we've done for other transit agencies to help them through this. But unfortunately, with the lack of consistency in the whether the operators are logging in or not logging in at the right time, and the data that's going into the system is inconsistent. We don't have enough information to fall back on something else. Like if they were providing us inconsistent entries, we could fall back on the GFI data, your fare box. We pull your fare box data every 4 hours, or a backup of your fare box data every 4 hours. So we can see what times the drivers logged in. And the fare boxes are tied to the atomic clock in Colorado. So we call that gospel because NASA uses that time as gospel. So we don't question that time. But unfortunately, when they don't log in or they log in randomly, we can't use that time. So like Carrie said, it goes to the training of the operators. If we had the operators doing what they're supposed to be doing and logging into the fare box during the pre-trip and logging out when they return to the shop or when they switch over to a new operator, when they slide seats, you'll have the data that you're supposed to have. And that's the whole point to a data management system. And it only takes a few minutes to train an operator. I mean, we've had properties that actually put a sign at the gate saying, please remember to log into your fare box.
With a blinking light on top.
Yes, and that was very successful. But keeping in mind that FTA says that in order for a vehicle to be in revenue service, they have to be capable of collecting revenue and counting passengers. And right now, when you don't log in the fare box, you cannot collect revenue. Even though you're riding free,
Or count the passengers.
you can't count the passenger. So, it's an easy fix. And it, boils down to training the operator and or the dispatcher. And I think that's all we had.
Wow, that was a lot. That was a lot. But it was, I appreciate the clarity that you walked us through that with. Let me ask the committee if there are any members who have specific questions for you. Yes.
Yes, I have a question. Is this something proposed or is this something already being done or what?
Yes, sir. You have it. This has been in place since July. And we have been working with RapDev and John and Leroy and Tanisha on what information we're seeing. Strategic mapping is not tied in yet, but John has asked us to tie it in, and that's there's.
But my question is, if this is working, we're still in that same position as not getting good data. So.
All right. So Mr. Fergus, let me see if I can feedback what I was hearing from Mr. Kuhn and Ms. Wilson. What they seem to have a really well working system with the subcontractor with TCS in terms of both training the operators to enter the data, following up with them on exceptions, and getting data corrected. And what they seem to be needing is a similar kind of working relationship with RapDev, the main contractor, on the fixed route, for the fixed route data. Is that accurate, Mr. King?
Yes, that's accurate. That's exactly
okay. Okay, and so they see what needs to be done. And I think it sounds to me like what we need now is for, and Mr. Bell, you would have to say, who is it on your staff that needs to work most directly with these folks, the Solutions for Transit folks, to assure that what's happening in the subcontractor for paratransit is also happening on fixed route. I mean, I don't think we can overstate how important this is, because it certainly has to do with counting riders and how we plan for routes and all of that. But it also is the database for that RapDev reporting actual hours of service, which we then pay them for. So this is their income is tied into this, as well as the whole issue of we are required as an agency to report this data to FTA in order to get federal funds. So our money is tied into this too. So it seems to me that this is one of the most critical things for us to get right.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And I ultimately agree with you. However, I've got to disagree with the efforts that RTP Dev is making based on what I've heard, because I myself have been working hand in hand with the consultant who've had meetings with Bobby and his team. And I have been working with our team to try and get some things remedied. This is very, very touchy. And we understand, and I truly understand with my tenure in this industry, how important this data is. But I can't stress enough how difficult it's been to try and duplicate the vision that they see. And of course, try and find gaps to try and move forward in a manner that it does not create further occurrences. So to say that, I think it's definitely an opportunity for us to review what's been shared and come back later with a response, because in the past, we've notated on several occasions some of the challenges that we have had with the system. And I say that because this has been an ongoing discussion since July, and RTP Dev has gone to great lengths to communicate that, not just to the local staff, but of course in other presentations. So we're still working. We're still making efforts to try and fix the problems by digging through manifest and looking up DVIRs, to redesigning DVIRs to make sure that we're eliminating the challenges that are being represented and being presented, I should say, by SFT. So again, I can't express to you enough how much we know the importance of this and are trying to create it, because in the end, our name is on this just as much as the comment, and we want to do the best that we possibly can for everybody involved. But to do so, there has to be a meeting of the minds and working things out. And matter of fact, there's meetings that are about to be scheduled with efforts to try and resolve some of the items moving forward with the February 8th service change, and trying to make sure that technologies are communicating effectively based on what I understand. So yes, this is an ongoing effort, and I think we need to come back to you with a more detailed explanation on those things that have been shared today.
Mr. Bell.
Yes, sir.
Am I hearing that RapDev weren't in at the beginning of this? Is it you at a point that your training isn't up to the comments training?
I would not say that. I would say that since the start of the contract, or at least since I've been here, noticed a large turnover in staff from a management standpoint. Therefore, there has been some areas where we've seen some employees not follow through, and we've had to redirect. That happens everywhere you go, and it's something that you have to be able to catch. We've also identified some reports that weren't available to us that we need to be able to utilize in order to catch operators in advance when it happens during the day, versus at the end of the month or well after the damage has been done. So there's a multitude of items that we have to address. Yes, sir.
Bell, let me ask you this. How long have you been in Columbia?
Since the 1st of December.
All right, now at what point going forward would all these little issues you would say are resolved and RepDev is whole? Because we keep hearing we can't do this, turn over this, can't do this, don't have this. At some point, that should end, don't you think?
Oh, yes, I completely agree. I completely agree.
So I would just like to know at what point will RepDev say, we got a hold of this monster and it's running fine?
And that's where I believe we've got to be able to come back to you guys with a true answer on that. I can't tell you emphatically right now today because I know there are some technology challenges that need to be addressed to be able to do that for you, sir. I wish I honestly and truly could, but we've definitely got to address those first.
All right, so let me ask, who needs in what you're talking about working through, who needs to be in that effort? I mean, you will designate somebody from the RepDev staff who's the kind of point person on this?
Well, right now, I am definitely the one that's in the middle of it, heavily involved in it. So I am coordinating with just about everybody on the RTP dev team, and I've been communicating directly with the consultant who has been involved in trying to help out as well.
All right, and so Mr. Kuhn, you and Ms. Wilson are involved in this directly?
We were. I mean, it's. I'll be real honest with you. A couple of weeks ago, we told the RepDev, and we told the Michael Hubble that we wouldn't be attending any more of the conferences until we saw an inch of progress. And we even said there's the smallest of the issues. The fuelers weren't completely fueling the propane buses, and the bus would go out the next day, sometimes only go 7 to 10 miles, and then break down for no fuel. And I said, it seems like if you're low on operators and low on vehicles, the easiest thing to do would be to design the fuelers to just check that gauge before they park the bus and make sure it's completely fueled. And I said, so if you just post a notice saying that you want them to do that and send me that picture, I'll attend the meeting. But otherwise, if I see no progress going forward, I can't have my staff on a hour and a half to 2 hour phone call every week to talk about the same things over and over again. We don't get paid for that. Our contract with you is based on a yearly service fee, and we'll provide you everything that you ask for during that time. And we don't get paid for any of that, but we don't mind doing it because we provide information. But we won't sit in on a 2 hour meeting discussing the same things over and over again without an inch of progress forward. So I declined any further meetings a couple of weeks ago and said, my staff won't attend further meetings until you give me an inch of progress. And I spoke about the July data. July, we thought was complete. RepDev told us that it was complete, but I told them that it looked like they were missing some information. They were low on their hours, which would give them more money, not less. Our system isn't looking at a better position for the Comet or a better position for RepDev. It's looking for accuracy. So I told them, I believe you have 11 pieces of work missing. Here's where they can be found. If you can provide that, I'll put them in for you. So you won't even have to do it. And we've been asking that for a while now. And we weren't given that. So no, we're not attending any meetings. We're not in a regular conversation or discussion. We were told that we would be getting the schedule a couple weeks ago. We haven't gotten that. I disagree that we're given a list of things that aren't working. I disagree with that entirely. What we did get from Mike Hubble was that he felt it would be better for the contractor to have access to report that Tanisha designed. And we left that up to Tanisha because Tanisha designed them. Carrie wrote them for her, but they were for Tanisha. So Tanisha went through that and she gave a bunch of the reports that she felt were where it was useful. What Carrie found was that a lot of the reports were already in there, just in other sections. But I know that John's tried to schedule a couple meetings with Maurice, that Maurice wanted to air some issues with the data entry, but each of those, there was no issues that were aired. So I disagree with the comment. You know, our database management system is more than 10 years old. It's used by a lot of federal properties. And if there was all of these issues with it, then we would hear from it from all over the place. Most of our clients close a month within 5 days. Most of the contractors get a bonus from their corporate office if they close within that time period. So we work diligently to make sure that we can meet that agenda on their side. And we provide all of our analysis are provided in the data management system, even without us, but we still do a weekly review. So we stand proud of the data management system, and I'll always stand proud until someone tells me that something's not working, and then I'll fix it. But I can't think of anything that isn't working, and we haven't been communicating anything that isn't working.
Okay, here we are, and the devil is in the details, isn't it? Because
Yep.
I think that what needs to be done now, it goes way beyond the service committee's role, but I believe that each one of us hearing what the others have to say here, that we really do have an urgency for people to sit down with those details together and take a deep breath and a fresh start, because it seems just from listening to this that this is doable. This is something that can work. And it's not a matter of, I'm not hearing that there's a technology system we've bought that doesn't function, because I'm hearing what you're saying about how it does, but it's in the details that always, as we know, involve human effort and who does what exactly the way it's supposed to be done to get the results that you need. So all I know to do from the committee's perspective is to ask Mr. Bell from RapDev, the folks from Solutions for Transit, the Comet staff, to really hash this out, to get at the specifics of what has to be done. And I mean, I think you're really fortunate if you have the paratransit part of the system working well, that that the system can work, and what needs to happen on the front end for things to for you to have the right information in the system to produce the results that you want. So do I have any recommendations from committee members about how to proceed from here?
I think they need to get their heads together, the two areas, and work together, work out a system, which is going to work for the best for us. So, and that's the only way we're going to get the job corrected to get it done. And you've got to have that partnership working together. That's the only way.
Right.
That's my recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Clayton. Anybody else? So I feel like, we need that commitment, as Ms. Gleaton pointed out, to the kind of really hard effort on everybody's part to make this work. And it really doesn't sound impossible to me, but I think having heard all that we've heard today, and Mr. Bell, I heard you say, well, we need to go back and look at these specifics, and Mr. Kuhn, I hear you saying that you are perfectly willing to work with them on that, as long as you are seeing some responsiveness to the things that you are bringing to the table. And the same with you, John, and Tanisha. Do you all see a path forward in this issue? Because I mean, this is a really big. This is everybody's money. This is RapDev's payment. This is federal funds to the Comet, and this is the whole ridership data on which we plan the system.
Yes, Madam Chairwoman, I believe that there is a path forward. just hearing the whole discussion, one, we'll have a conversation with Solutions for Transit to see if we can address the compensation piece, recognizing that it looks like we're going to have to throw in some more resources to help with this effort, at least from the comments perspective, so that we can continue to work with our ATP Dev on addressing some of the concerns that have been brought up. And it may require a change in the cost that we pay for Solutions for Transit, but we'll have that conversation with them. And then we'll also work with Ms. Baker and Mr. Hubble to see if we can bring those parties together and identify kind of like an action plan on the path forward.
I think that's what we're looking for as a committee is an action plan that every part of the system, both the contractors, are all committed to. So that would be the product I'm looking for. Is that sound right to the committee?
Can I add something in real fast?
Yes.
I just want to say this as directly as I possibly can. We're not interested in additional compensation. I feel that's fraud, waste, and abuse of taxpayers' dollars. I will provide you every piece of support that you want. All I'm asking is that RepDev provide 1 inch of moving forward, whatever that is, any progress. Just show me that there's any progress. As simple as posting a notice on the fuel island, asking the fuelers to ensure by looking at the gauge that the bus is fueled before they park it. If you'd like, I'll write you the note and then just post it. So 1 step of progress is all that we are asking, because we don't want to waste our time like we've done for the last 9 months attending meetings and no progress going forward. We believe that Maurice is probably going to provide a good management solution there that was lacking in the past, but the proof is in the pudding. I still need somebody to do anything, but I can't accept additional compensation because I believe in taxpayers' rights. And I don't believe in fraud, waste, and abuse. And I don't want your additional money. I just want some progress. That's all I'm asking for.
Well, I can tell you, to me, I don't think we could ask more than that from your side. So let's we'll just leave this with the expectation that that John and Tanisha, that Mr. Bell and his staff, and that the Solutions for Transit folks are going to put together an action plan and we'll look forward to seeing that plan and the results of it at our next meeting.
Madam Chair and Bobby, I think the information you're looking for has been done with respect to the fueling, because all of the numbers on the fueling issue occurred over the course of October, November, and December. But if you look at January and February, those numbers are come way down based on what we implemented. So that effort is there, Bobby. And I think if you take a look at it, you'll see it.
If I may, the numbers you're looking at are based on comments that are added to the data entries. We have noticed that very few comments were done in January or February. That's why that report looks so good for January and February, because it is based on the comments that the dispatchers put in saying, well, this bus was traded out due to low fuel. What's happened is nobody has been really reviewing the January and February and correcting the errors. So as soon as all those errors get corrected, I'd be willing to bet that there will be a significant number of low fuel exchanges that are not currently shown, because that report we're looking at is based solely on the comments that are added to the entries. So I can, in just looking through the comments, I can see that most of the lines are blank. So I know the comments have not been updated yet.
But we do still see bus exchanges.
I feel like right at this point that we're getting way more into the weeds in terms of what the committee has to contribute to this, and that the conversation that's begun here needs to continue until you all can work through what the gaps are between what one person thinks has been done and what another person has received as being done. I mean, And I think, John, your proposal that you work both with Ms. Baker and Mr. Hubble, whoever needs to be involved in developing the action plan, that would happen at the close of this meeting.
Yes, I will, I'll start that conversation immediately after this meeting with Ms. Baker on the next step, and we'll report back to you by the next meeting.
Okay.
All right, now I'm gonna make a call on the agenda now because we've kept you way longer. I'm gonna propose that we take the items D, E, and F left under the section that we're on, and defer those again to the next meeting, and just take a final item of welcoming the new RapDev operations manager. And Mr. Bell, did you want to introduce him?
Sure, my pleasure. I believe he's on the call.
Good.
Mr. Joey McKelvey, who comes to us with over 19 years of management experience. He's from the area. When I say that, he actually went to the University of South Carolina for a stint. And so he's very familiar with what's going on here. He currently resides in Georgia, and we're looking forward to him making his final selection and move up this way. So, Joey, are you able to speak? Joey, he may have already stepped out.
Okay, well, but he is actually on the ground now and present.
Yes, he is. He's been here now for a little over a week, and he's picking up very fast with a lot of the processes. So we're real confident he's going to do well.
Well, I hope it's been helpful to him to have heard the discussions at today's meeting, because I think that would that'll give him another piece of the picture of what we're trying to accomplish here. Okay. Any other? Are there any other? On the only other item on our agenda was the transit operations report, but I believe we probably thoroughly covered all of that, Mr. Bell, unless you have something.
Just for formality on 9F, we need action from the service committee per board policy or per board procedures on key personnel.
Oh, okay. So we need to just take some action. We just need a motion to approve the appointment of Mr. McKelvey.
Or recommend to the board that you appoint, yes.
Recommend approval. All right, because we're acting on a kind of an interim action.
Correct.
All right, so let's just, so what we're trying to do is make the
Rob, look at Rob.
Get on the record, what is necessary to have on the record for Mr. McKelvey to be official. So do I have a motion that we make a recommendation to the board to approve the appointment of Mr. McKelvey as the RapDev operations manager?
So moved.
So we have a motion. Is there a second? There's a second. All in favor? Let's take a roll call on this one, Pam.
Okay. Mr. Brennan? Ms. Horacio?
Here you go, look in.
Step out. Mr. Fergus?
Yes.
Ms. Gleaton?
Yes.
Ms. Mood?
Yes.
The motion carries with the quorum.
All right. So the motion carries, and we'll take that to the board at the next meeting. And all right. So then with that, Mr. Bell, is there anything urgent that you need to add to the RapDev report?
Not at this time, ma'am. I think we're good.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Miss Mood,
Yes.
this is John Lay. I would like to say that, I've heard this discussion and we did get the report on the solutions during the meeting. And we will be glad to provide a written report in response to that, that document that we just received. There are quite a few things that we disagree with, and I think it would be good to highlight that to make sure we know what we're dealing with, because ultimately we have the same goal, which is to make sure that we're working and the system is working the way that it should. But we have some very specific things that we'll need to deal with. So if you don't mind, we'd like to submit a written response to the written document we just received during this meeting.
Well, I'm going to leave that to you all to work with Ms. Baker on, and with John on, and with Mr. Bell to accomplish that.
Thank you very much.
Anything else that needs to come before the committee?
No, I just want to ask you a question. Who is John Lay?
Oh, Mr. Lay is the attorney for RapDev.
Okay, and how about Rob Stevens?
So
I don't know, Mr. Stevens.
He is an RTP Dev employee.
Okay.
That's right. He's a RapDev employee. Yes.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
And we had a motion and a second. I want to thank you for your attention and your effort. And all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And any opposed? If not, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.